And we'll try to get through these first 5 verses here. And it deals with a certain scene, and we've already dealt with these people a little bit, but we'll get a little bit deeper into it tonight. But when we were in chapter 13, we dealt with basically what was going on in Satan's world, all right, Satan's vantage point, about how the false prophet or the second beast would come along and support and pull attention to the first beast, which is the Antichrist, to be worshipped and to be adored by this world, and it'll be charged powerfully by Satan himself, and this is what they do. The false prophet will exalt the Antichrist to be worshipped. He'll desecrate the temple, set himself up to be God and be worshipped as God. And so that's what we're seeing in chapter 13. Then we get into chapter 14, and we change vantage points, and we look at things from God's vantage point. Remember, I told you early on, you got to kind of keep this straight, how sometimes you get a heavenly vantage point, sometimes you get an earthly vantage point, and then from this 13 is basically from what's going on with Satan, and then in chapter 14, the beginning there, is what's going on in the mind and heart of God. And this is something that is still yet to happen, so it's still in the future. And he's looking at this, and it says, look, this is a vision that John has. This is, again, in between the trumpets and the bowl judgments, all right? So this is where we're at. We're in between the trumpets and the bowl judgments, and there are still more judgments to come. But John is seeing into the future, and he's seeing into the future at the return of Christ. He's seeing all the way into the future. But we've given some more information about the 144,000 in this passage. All right, and so let's just go through it, and let's read these the 5 verses here. And it says, "And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruit unto God and unto the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God." And so, again, we're seeing these 144,000. We're going to get a little bit deeper into that tonight. But when it says here, and I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion. Now, I hope if we've gone through this study, and if you've been in church any length of time, who's the Lamb? All right. You remember when John the Baptist, he says, "Behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world." This is who we're talking about. In chapter number 5, we see the Lamb standing again. Chapter 5, let me find it here. Verse number... Do what now? No. Chapter 5? Yeah. In verse number 6. "And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and the 4 beasts, in the midst of the elders, stood a Lamb as it had been slain, having 7 heads and 7 horns and 7 eyes." So again, you see here in this throne room scene back in chapter 5 that we've already dealt with, that you see the Lord standing, or the Lamb standing as he had been slain. But then here you see him, and this is one of victory. This is actually projecting into the future when the second coming will take place, because it shows him standing on Mount Zion. Now, I think it's in Zechariah is where we read about that, where it talks about the Lord coming and when he sets foot on the earth. And we talked about the difference between the rapture and the second coming, right? What's the rapture? He's coming for his saints, and in the second coming, he's coming with his saints, right? And so that's 2 different events. And so the rapture, it triggers the tribulation, all right? And then the second coming, it finalizes the tribulation, right? And so that's when the Lord comes back to establish his throne. And he's actually going to set foot on Mount Zion, or In other words, the Mount of Olives. If you don't know, if you've ever been to Israel, Mount Zion is an area. It is basically where Jerusalem is, and the Mount of Olives is just outside, right there at, right beside Jerusalem. I mean, you can actually just about throw a stone and hit the eastern wall from the Mount of Olives. I mean, you can see everything from there, and so it's in very close proximity. And so he's setting foot on the Mount of Olives when he returns, and the Mount of Olives, what's going to happen when he sets on his feet on the earth? Is the Mount of Olives is going to split, right? It's going to split, and then he's going to walk into the eastern gate, and we see here the victorious Christ. This is what we see, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion. Mount Zion is Jerusalem. Where is the throne of David? Where would that be? Where is he going to rule and reign? Where is he going to rule the earth? Where's it from? From where is he going to rule the earth? Let me say it that way. He's going to rule from Jerusalem. This is where this is talking about. And it says, this is where he is. He's on Mount Zion. This is Jerusalem. And he's standing. And again, this is not the lamb. It is the lamb that has been slain, but he is coming now in victory and in power. All right? And now we see with him 144,000 having his Father's name written in their foreheads. Now, I hope that you remember what we talked about, and let's see here. It was in chapter number 7. We already talked about the 144,000. We talked all about them, about they were sealed, they had the name of God, and basically God puts something with them that he puts his power and his protection, and basically he puts his name on them as his possession. All right, this is what he does with that 144,000. Now, make no mistake, all of these are Jews. There are 10,000 from each, 12,000 from each tribe. I got to get my math right. 12,000 from each tribe. There are 12 tribes of Israel, and so there's 12,000 from each tribe. That's 144,000. That's laid out clearly in chapter number 7. These are not Gentiles at all. Now, I do believe that there will be Gentiles that make it through the tribulation, and I believe there are Jews that are going to make it through the tribulation, and that will inhabit the earth during the millennial reign to repopulate the earth. Because up to this point that we've been looking at the tribulation, there has been death and destruction like the world has never seen before. Over half the population has been wiped out. And how many do we have now? We're getting close to 8 billion people. And so we could say if that happened tomorrow, then there would be over 4 billion people that would have been killed, okay, either by the wrath of God, some of these plagues coming out, or being hunted down by the cohorts of Satan, because if anything that names the name of the true God, he is against it. As a matter of fact, it gives the instance, and I'm rehearsing a little bit here of what we've already talked about. You remember when the Jews, they run to the wilderness, and Satan is after them, and he makes 2 attempts to try to kill those Jews that run to the wilderness. Some people think this is Petra. That's not 100% certain, but that's where some people think. And Satan is going to try twice to kill those that are still naming the name of God and that hold his name, the Jewish people, and God supernaturally will stop those attacks. So in one place it says that he tries to flood them out of where they are, and the earth swallows up the water. And then another one is that the armies of Satan are trying to surround them, and they can't. They're just thwarted by the power of God. But these 144,000 are people. These are men. Let me say that first of all, because when you get down and it says they have not defiled themselves with women. They are virgins, and they follow the Lord whithersoever they go. Well, in this case, they are they which have not defiled with women. So what would this lead you to believe that they are? They're men, all right? So there are 144,000 men that are evangelists. These are people that God has set to do his bidding, and he put a seal upon them at the earlier part of the tribulation period to do his bidding, to preach the gospel, to stand for truth. And because during this time, Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet, it's all about deception. It's all about deception. And what is Satan about now? He's all about deception now. I mean, his plan doesn't change. He is deceiving people as we speak. And so his plan and the Antichrist and the false prophet are going to come together, be supernaturally empowered to deceive people on this earth. And so these group of 144,000 are going to be people that are proclaiming truth, standing for truth, have the name of God, and they're going to have this protection about them. They will have endured the 7 years of tribulation. Now I want you to think about that. As they have seen horrors like the world have never seen before. I mean, earthquakes, meteors, water, the salt water turning to blood, the fresh water turning bitter, meteor showers, wars, famines, all sorts of things going on like that. And it just intensifies and getting stronger and stronger. And they have lived through this. They have seen all of this. In some cases, they have experienced some of that. They're just because they have the seal of God doesn't mean that they're exempt from catastrophic events, but they're not going to be killed. I'm just going to tell you that. They're not going to be killed because you see them all the way sealed toward the beginning parts of the tribulation, and now you see them with the Lord Jesus Christ in the Mount Zion, in Jerusalem, with Him, serving and ruling and reigning with Him physically. These are men. These are not some other beings or anything like that. These are not angels. These are men, and there are 144,000 of them that are standing with Christ. And it says, having His Father's name written in their forehead. And we'll just contrast that a little bit. Now, if you're going to be here and you're going to be in the tribulation, now, if you're a believer right now, you're not going to be here, right? We're going to be raptured out. But if you're left behind and you don't know Christ as your Savior, and you're having to buy and sell and gain and try to get food, there's something you're going to have, and that's called the mark of the beast. That's on the forehead or on the right hand. All right, and so this is what Satan has imposed. This is what the Antichrist will use to enforce. And an interesting illustration that we have of this in modern times is like when we went through the time of COVID. All right, when you went through the time of COVID, some people lost their jobs because they would not take the jab. You know, I mean, they lost their jobs because of it. Now, and this was not even as organized as it could have been. Now, I want you to think when he comes on the scene, and man, you got to have certain criteria to buy or sell anything, not just to have a job, not just to go to work, not just because, you throw a mask on or something like that. No, you've got to have this criteria. You've got to have this paperwork done in order for you just to buy food. And so they have this criteria as far as the Antichrist, people that are serving Antichrist and worshiping the beast. All right, but then on the contrary side, you have this 144,000, and they have a mark as well. But what is that mark? That is a mark. They have the name of God. They have the seal and stamp of God's approval, and these are men that have been set aside for special purpose during this time of human history. And will it be difficult on them? If they don't have the mark of the beast, how difficult will it be? Now, I don't know if God's going to miraculously feed them. We don't know. We're not told any of that. But we do understand that they're going to be living through probably the most difficult time of human history to live. All right? And you can look back across history, some of the times that Israel has gone through. In recent days, World War II, the Holocaust, you can see that. Millions and millions of Jews eradicated. You can go on back a little further when Rome destroyed Jerusalem. Their blood was running in the streets. You can go back a little further when Babylon, when they took them captive. Babylon took Israel captive. And so this has gone on and on. So this is nothing new. Suffering is nothing new to the Jews. But this is, again, a step above what they have ever seen before. But nevertheless, these 144,000 are going to be faithful, godly witnesses. And God always leaves a witness. When you think about the times of Babylon, let's just say, for instance, man, that was the bleakest times. They had been taken from their home. Jerusalem was destroyed. And here they are taken prisoner into a foreign land. And what is one character? What is one character that rises above everybody else? And I mean, he is a faithful and true witness in his generation. Give me one of them. One of them would be Daniel. He lived during that time. And we can read about that, and God used him. I mean, he was one that would not bow. He would not bend. He stood for truth. When he said you can't pray, what did he do? He prayed anyhow. He was willing to take the consequences. He's thrown in the lion's den, all those things. What about, let's go a little further. What about Joseph? Joseph would be another. I mean, he was persecuted but he stood firm. Through everything that he had to endure, did he ever curse God? Or did he ever say, God, why am I going through? You never see that with him. He always stood for truth, and he was always that faithful and true witness there. What about the Apostle Paul? Was he a faithful and true witness? Was he persecuted because of it? He was. Now, we look at those instances, and I'm sure there were other people that lived and stood for truth during those seasons, but you have this season of this 7-year period. It is not just a handful. You have those 2 witnesses that we talked about already, but you have 144,000 men that are standing for truth in the middle of all the deception that is going on. Can you imagine how hot the devil would be with them? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine, the Antichrist is ruling this world at that time. Can you imagine how angered he would be and how desirous he would be to want to kill them and make life as miserable as he possibly could? Nevertheless, let me just say, they lived through that. They lived through this season, and you have that 144,000. It is a large group. And by the way, I think that outnumbers even the numbers of missionaries that Christians have sent around the world in modern age. That we have missionaries even right now. That's more missionary. Think about that. There's going to be more missionaries during the tribulation period than there are at our present time where we live. Think about that. So the setting again is Christ's return, and again the glory of Christ, and he again on the throne. He's setting up his throne. Again, in chapter 15 through 20, we're going to see more judgments. These are going to be the bold judgments that are coming. But we're getting this projected view. We're projecting this outwards. And let me go down. As a matter of fact, just to kind of reiterate what I'm saying here, go back to chapter 6 for just a minute. And this is talking about that when they began to open the 7 seals. And when it gets to chapter 6, verse number 17, and it says, and I want you to remember that chapter and verse divisions were added later. Chapter and verse division are not inspired scripture, okay? They put those in later on for us to be able to find where we can go. So, for instance, when these books were written, it was the book of Revelation. It was just like a letter that was written. And later on, people came and put verse numbers. You with me? And so these were not, verse numbers and chapter divisions were not in the original Greek and original manuscripts, okay? It wasn't. Even in the Old Testament, it wasn't that way. It's been added so that when we get up like this, I can say, go to Revelation 14, verse number 1, and everybody can get there fairly quickly, okay? So because of that, now I want us to read this, and I know there's a chapter division here, but I want you to go to chapter 6, verse number 17, and it says, "For the great day of his wrath is come." Now again, this is the tribulation just beginning to unfold. These plagues just beginning, the wrath of God is about to be poured out, and it says, "Who shall be able to stand?" And we talked about this and we dealt with this verse, and then it says, "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing in the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, and the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree." And you go on down. Verse 3 saying, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." So look, when it asks that question, who is able to stand? What's one of the first groups that you run into? Is the 144,000. These are the ones that are going to stand during the tribulation, have to endure the tribulation period, and they're going to be the faithful and true witnesses for the truth during that dark season of human history. All right, or history that has yet to be written of the human timeline. I'll say it that way. And So anyway, so they're going to be sealed by the mark of God, and these are His possession. They're going to have His power. Again, that's verse number 1 of chapter 14. And then let's look at the second verse here. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Now, and I'm going to go through, this voice of many waters, this is just loud. Have you ever been, Faye and I recently, we went to Yellowstone. All right, and there's a place in Yellowstone called the Little Grand Canyon. All right, Little Grand Canyon. How many seen that before? All right, okay, 3. All right. So when you're in that place, there's a waterfall. It's about 300 feet deep. All right, it falls like 300 feet, all right? And man, I mean, you get close to that, you can't even hardly talk. I mean, it's just roaring, you know. And what that, I think what it's saying here as the voice of many waters, this is just a loud voice. And it goes into this, but, and it says, and I heard the voice of harpers harping. And it talks about the 24 elders back in earlier chapters that they have harps. So it could be the 24 elders playing instruments or harps, and then you have voices. Now, who all is in heaven? You have angels that are there in heaven. You have the 24 elders, and the 24 elders are representative of the church itself. So you have the church that's in heaven. You have angels that are in heaven. You have the 4 beasts that are in heaven. You have all these creatures that are in heaven. And what are we doing all the way in chapter 5 and 6? Man, we're praising, we're singing. But look what it says here. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, as the voice of great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne. So not only do they have power or protection from the Lord, now they're praising the Lord. You have this 144,000, we're going to get to that. They're also praising the Lord. And it says, no man could learn the song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. You know, that's an interesting, do we know what song this is? I don't know. It's going to be a new song, okay? We don't know. Now, if you go to the Psalms, there's so many times where it talks about singing a new song. As a matter of fact, we're going to sing a song that the angels can't sing as far as believers, as far as Christians, as far as the church. They can't sing that. And then the 144,000 are going to be singing a song that, look, they're the ones who are the only ones that can sing that. All right, this is something that's exclusive to them. But I do believe redemption is going to be included in that, because in verse 3 it says that the very last phrase, it says that they were redeemed from the earth, and I think that's probably part of that song. They're the only ones, as far as I know, that are going to be sealed with that name of the Lord in their forehead. That could be part of a song. They're unique in that manner. They're unique in this manner that they have lived through the tribulation and been faithful all the way to the end. They've endured all this. That could be incorporated, but nevertheless, I believe redemption is also going to be a part of that song. So they're going to be praising. And nevertheless, it is going to be loud. It is going to be thunderous. It is going to be joyful. It is going to be all those things. Now, look, I love our choir, don't you? On Sunday mornings, don't you love our choir? And they sing so great. And but look, I want you to imagine that you know, and it doesn't even have to be with sound system. You know, I don't know if you're gonna have sound systems up in heaven, all right, or even here in Jerusalem. At Jerusalem, you know, I don't think that's. But this is going to be something. There's going to be praise coming from heaven. There's going to be praise coming from the earth when the Lord returns. 144,000 is going to be part of that. They're going to be singing a song that is new. And they're going to be praised. It's going to be joyful. It's going to be thunderous. It's going to be loud, and it is reserved for the 144,000. So let's go down to the next verse. They sung, as it were, a new song before the throne and before the 4 beasts and the elders. So they're singing it before the beasts and the elders. So that they're observing. All right. Now remember where we are. We're at Mount Zion. Remember that? We're at Mount Zion. We're not in heaven. We're at Mount Zion. But heaven is looking on. Do you see that? Heaven is looking on at this time. The elders are there, and then the 4 beasts are there, And it says the 144,000 which were redeemed for the earth. And this is what it talks about. Let's talk about their purity for a minute. Verse number 4. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Now, in other words, these are men that they have not had any sexual contact. They haven't had anything like that. They have completely devoted themselves to the Lord and remained pure. This is their life. All right, that's what they have done. Now, let's contrast this for a minute. If you study Old Testament religions, if you study this, and you would probably even recognize it today, but when you were worshiping Baal in the Old Testament, that's a name that you probably ought to be familiar with, Baal. Or sometimes even in the New Testament, when you had, like when the Apostle Paul was preaching at Athens, and he went, and there were all these idol gods, and there was one erected, he said, about to the unknown God. They had all these other gods. And you had all these fertility gods and things like that. But a lot of the worship of these other gods incorporated, it's not like we worship today and we come and we sing some songs and we hear some truth from God's Word, and it wasn't like that. It was fleshly, it was sensual. It did not appeal to the spirit, it appeals to the flesh. All this idol worship in these temples that were erected. And inside these temples, they would even have prostitutes. They would have things. And so there were sexual activity that was incorporated into the worship of these idol gods. Okay? It was all carnal. It was all sensual. And so that was part of the worship. That was part of the initiations. That was part of just the worship of these gods. Now, this is what the Antichrist is going to be promoting. Do you understand that? Now, in the day that we live, you see the rise of this. Even in my lifetime, we talk about things today, even in church, we talk about things today that was taboo, back when I was a kid. But we have to. We have to address these things, We have to. And but it is getting so, the world is getting so carnally minded and so sexually charged. It's in the schools. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And now you hear of girls having babies at younger than 12 even. I mean, it starts early. And I'm not talking about just rape. I'm talking about this is lifestyles. And so you see this coupled with the religious factor that's going to be introduced with idol gods and things like that, and the Antichrist being the center of that. And this is what he's going to be promoting. Now, this appeals to the flesh. If you don't know the Spirit of God, man, that might sound tempting. If God is not in your life and you don't know that, to a young man, that might seem tempting. And but this is what's going to be promoted. All right, so that is going to be going on rampantly, as well as all the other chaotic things that's going to be going on. But then you have this 144,000, which is going to make the other crowd even madder, because look, they have not defiled themselves. They're not worshiping other gods like like the other crowd is worshiping, and they're remaining pure and they're remaining clean. And by the way, all these are men, because it says they have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. And it says, these are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. So here's the other thing, is they're following the Lord. It doesn't matter what he wants. It doesn't matter. Now, how pliable are we? The only thing about if God said, I want you to go to South Africa. Now, we know we have Katie and Jordan, and they've committed to do that. But what if the Lord wanted you to do that? Would you resist that? Or would you say, hey, I'm ready to go, let's go do that? You said, these follow the Lord whithersoever he goeth. In other words, it doesn't matter what the Lord wants. It doesn't matter where he wants them to go. It doesn't matter how he wants them to do it. It doesn't matter what the cultural atmosphere is. It doesn't matter anything. They're standing for truth in the face of opposition, and it does not matter what it costs them. It does not matter the extent that the Lord wants them to go. They're willing to go all the way wherever the Lord is leading and wherever he tells them and whatever he tells them to do. He goes with them. They go with him whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruit unto God and unto the Lamb. Now, I'll talk about that for just a minute. The first fruits. What does that mean? The first fruit is the fruit that comes off the vine first. It's the early fruit, if you would. Now, what does it mean, these 144,000 being the first fruit? Now, it's almost as though, and I want to try to explain this in such a way, all right, when we've come through the church age, and then the church is raptured out, correct? All right, and so there's no more witness at that point. The Holy Spirit is removed, but then he begins again with these 144,000 to be a witness for him, all right? And so these are they whom he sealed. These are the first fruits in the tribulation period. Does that make sense? Within that tribulation period that have been redeemed. And so these are the ones that carry the mark, again, of the Lord Jesus Christ and of the Father. And these are the first fruits. In other words, these are the first because we see it all the way back in chapter 7. This is early on in the tribulation when they are sealed. But these are the first, unto God and unto the Lamb. And in verse number 5, and it says, and in their mouth was found no guile. Can you imagine finding somebody who's never lies, have never lied at all? I mean, they're living in a world where lies prevail. All right, here, who is a liar and the father of lies? Who is ruling the world at this time? Lies and deceit are running rampant, and in the middle of all of that, you have a group of men that are standing firm, and they're not lying, they're not defiled, they're speaking truth, if you would. They're undeterred, they're devoted to any task that the Lord gives, and in that world full of deception, they're giving truth. As a matter of fact, 2 Thessalonians, I'll go read a verse over there. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse number 9, it says this. Even him whose coming is after the work of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. Anyway, it's talking about the time, this is talking about the time when deception is ruling. Of course, Satan is behind all of that. But these particular men are going to be standing for truth and only speaking truth, and that's all they're going to speak. There's no guile coming out of their mouth. And this is their purpose. God has put them here for a purpose, and that purpose is to be the witness and to be the example during that time, the time of the tribulation. That's what the 144,000 are there for. In their mouth is found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Now, that does not mean without fault. It just means blameless, but it does not mean sinless. All right, that's not what that means. It means, you remember, it said something similar about Job. You remember what it said about Job? He says he was perfect and upright in his generation. It doesn't mean that he was sinless. It just means that he loved the Lord with all his heart, and he tried to live for the Lord with everything that he had. And for he was righteous. He was saved. He had been redeemed. Okay, and so when we look at these, it doesn't mean that they're sinless, but it does mean that, look, they're living for Him like no one else is during that time. I mean, they're being pure, they're being holy, they're living godly in the middle of perversion, in the middle of pursuit. They're holding to truth, they're proclaiming the truth, and their character, their lifestyle is backed. Their words are backed by their lifestyle. Does that make sense? So what they're saying, the truth, they're proclaiming the gospel, they're proclaiming the truth, and it's backed up by the lifestyle that they're living, by being holy and genuine and faithful in the middle of hardship, the worst hardship that man has ever seen. And so, anyway, so this is the 144,000. We've seen them again, so they've cropped up again. And so, all right, let me ask you a couple questions. You answer them. Where do these 144,000 come from? Hold on, I had 4 people. Somebody raise your hand and tell me. The what now? Their first fruits? All right, that's right. What nationality are they? They're Jews. All right. Is there a certain? How's that break down? There's 12 tribes. 12,000 from each tribe. Where do the 12, I didn't throw this in, but where do the 12 tribes come from? Huh? These are all Jacob's sons. Remember, all the way back, Jacob had 12 sons. His name was changed to Israel. And those 12 sons became the 12 tribes. All right, so that's what we see all through history, and then now we're seeing that into the tribulation period, the 12 tribes. All right. Let's see here. What is special about them? Give me a couple special things about them. No guile. Huh? They're men? Huh? They're virgins? Anything else? They have the mark of God? Okay. All these are good things, you know, and so anyway, that's the 144,000. All right. So next time we'll continue on, and we'll try to get verse 6 through 13 if you want to read ahead and kind of start studying that a little bit, verse 6 through 13. All right. That one's fairly simple. All right, you should be able to follow that one. All right, so all right, let's go to the Lord and ask for dismissal. Okay, Father, we love you. And